suggest to the council members present that we just have a discussion tonight, rather than calling any sort of a meeting to order, and we can just kind of tell you where we're at on a couple of things. Be kind of like a mini ward meeting. The first item that's on for us to discuss this evening is some items relative to the future possible no tax increase bond issue. And I'll go ahead and give one of those to you. Trying to hand out some timelines relative to that process. First of all, kind of talking with individual council members, I'm pretty much under the impression that everyone would like to see a no tax increase bond issue moving forward. And because we have time, again, what you see on the timeline is at some point in time, the council will have to formally say that with an ordinance. Until that time, staff will continue to move forward with the calendar that we talked about at the last work session, which is every 2 weeks at the work session, there'll be an item on the agenda to discuss the no tax increase bond issue. Whatever elements of that you would like. As we get a little bit closer to whatever the time frame is, I would see that becoming a much more detailed agenda relative to the prior discussions. We've ruled out the following projects. The following projects are still under discussion. You ask staff to come back with information on those projects, so the detail would start to draw out relative to what we're doing there to give it a little bit more structure. In the early going, we kind of thought that the council would prefer a little bit more freewheeling discussion amongst yourselves relative to those projects and how you'd like to see things going. So staff will continue to move forward with the concept that the council as a whole does want to see sometime in 2016 a no tax increase bond issue on the ballot. Second item is relative to the timing. We have checked with anyone who would be in conflict with the city relative to a ballot issue, and anyone who the voting public might think is a conflict with the city relative to a ballot issue, specifically the city of Belleville. None of them are currently anticipating a bond issue being on the ballot, with the exception of the school district. And the school district is just wrapping up their facility study. It will be a fairly large no tax increase bond issue that they are planning on putting on the ballot. They have not finalized that yet. Relative to time, they are going to put it on. They have debated back and forth between the August 2nd date and the April date. Spoke with Jay again last week, and he says the committee is going to lean towards pushing for the April date, but they have not completely finalized that yet. There's two ways of looking. If it is April and the council would like to see April, there are two ways of looking at that. It could be viewed as a conflict, putting a lot on the voters for that particular date. They are both anticipated to be no tax increase bond issues, and there could be some synergies to be gained. I have seen that actually happen when they're both on. You know, it's a growing community. None of this means an increase to your taxes, yet all of this work is going to be done relative to this. There are ways to sell that, for sure. If you're a little bit more worried about it, again, the August 2nd date, as you noted, both April, August, and November all have the lower percentage amount needed to pass the bond issue. And you see on here, on this particular piece of paper, the dates associated with each. I would probably suggest to the council that we consider the April date as far as our current work is concerned. Even if we get everything done and we get the projects finalized and we determine it at a later date that you all want to push it off, we're a little bit worried about the April date, to August, we have still done the homework necessary to get it on the August ballot. So staff would suggest to you all that we proceed as if it's going to be April 5th, 2016, in spite of the conflict. Relative to that, the council ordinances for filing would be in December. Again, all the way up to and including the ordinances, you could do the ordinances at any point and then do the filing. So up to the first ordinance, if somebody wanted to make an amendment relative to what the actual date was going to be, you could do it up through December of this year. The project finalization for the December date then would need to be about September 30th. So that's probably what the council should be keeping in mind, is that we will probably need to wrap up the final list of projects by September 30th of this year. Determination on campaign consultant, what does that one mean for you all? We're going to have a communications manager in place, and we have an assistant city manager who has quite a bit of experience with the city's component, and I have done I guess about 24 bond issues in my time, from the standpoint of being the political subdivision spokesperson, if you will. You'll remember the city itself we cannot advocate for a bond issue. So we would, when we talk about a consultant here, it is more relative to the projects. If we were civic center heavy on a project, the people are going to want to see what that looks like. If you're street heavy on a project, not so much. We didn't have a consultant last time. They just need to know the streets that are going to be done, and you don't. Sure.
We can't do an ad forum, we can't do an education.
That's correct. We do an educational one that we tout the need, and usually a separate committee is formed to really tout the need, and they can actually say vote yes. We cannot do that. But occasionally, even on one like that, especially if there's facilities involved, you will occasionally want a consultant on board to get the schematics ready. This is exactly what this will look like if you do vote for it, and the Vote Yes committee obviously uses that material as well. So the determination on that would need to be immediately after project finalization. We'd want to put an RFP on the street. The reason for waiting until project finalization, obviously, is we want to be able to put out the RFP and tell the consultants who are bidding, here's what we're looking at, so they know exactly what they're bidding on relative to their work if awarded. But that would give them plenty of time. The RFP would be issued in October, awarded in November, and so when we were actually filing the ordinances, the consultant would already be on board and starting their work. And then, of course, the campaign really hitches up in February and March. By then, they've got their work completed, and they're moving forward. And just depending on the elements of any facilities that you would be looking at relative to the bond issue would determine whether or not we need a consultant on board. So those are kind of the timelines for you all to chew on. If we would have had a quorum here, I would probably ask for a little bit more. So you'll see it as the first item on the agenda at the next work session for the bond issue is, as a component of this, staff is going to be looking for direction from the council on what you want to do with the $1.5 million. We have some recommendations, but the council, we'd like to see a complete council here before we start talking in that direction. It's an element of this because it would certainly take some items off of the no tax increase burden. And we have churned about that money before, and there's some things we can really put an anchor into as far as the information that we'll be giving you relative to the recommendations. Yes, sir.
Since we've been putting money in this cash fund, are we going to be doing more of that this year, so we'll have more than $1.5 million by the time it gets to that point?
That is entirely up to the council. Each time the money has been put in there, it's been at a council suggestion during the budget work session in August. And of course, it is entirely dependent on the fund balances that exist in the capital improvement sales tax fund and the general fund.
From a historical perspective, it would not be unreasonable to think that we might add, say, as much as another 500,000 and have a balance of 200,000, or is that a lofty expectation? I can't remember the amount we added last time, I guess is my biggest.
I do not see the capital improvement sales tax fund being able to sustain another $500,000 hit. And I'm extremely cautious right now with the capital improvement sales tax fund because that is the fund that we use to make the bond payments relative to the North Cass Parkway, Hubach Hill, and we're going to be bringing you all some suggestions for restructuring that particular bond issue since we have not seen the development to make the payments on those. And if that does not go through or goes through without a favorable disposition or as favorable as we'd like to see, we could see a pretty significant increase in that bond issue payment coming up in the very near future. So we want to be sure we keep a healthy fund balance in there to sustain that.
Doesn't Prairie View kind of figure into that? The subdivision that is coming?
It is? Okay, yes, then. The answer to that is yes. I thought it was just east of there, but it's just east of the TDD in the CID. We were going to bring up a project for discussion. If anybody has anything from the list that they want to see added or subtracted just for us to be reviewing, we'd be more than happy to entertain any of that you might have. You may want to wait until there's more here to have any discussions relative to the actual projects themselves.
I do have one, maybe. Johnson Drive from Darrowby over to Dean.
What we'll do is we can add that, and I assume you just want the information relative to cost, et cetera. Sure. Johnson Drive, Darrowby to Dean.
I think that would add a lot of in and out ability for Fox Haven.
Anybody else?
I'm going to jump all over topic. I know we don't have everybody here. I still think our best bet's probably the April 5th election, especially since the school's going to go for a no tax bond issue. Those are going to look like, I think, to me as a voter, it would look like those are parallel or companion bills. And they're either in the mood to vote for both, and typically school bond issues, especially no tax, do well, especially in this area. I think ideally I wanted to get out in front of theirs, but that's probably not going to happen. So I think we're better off doing that as opposed to writing the memory of a previous bond issue in April and somebody looking at it in August going, didn't we just vote for something like, people's memories fade fast. I personally think that we're better off with the April election. I think they'll look at it. They'll look at them as companion bills, even though they're two separate entities, if you will. And I think the people that vote for the issue will see that as a sign of progress with both the schools and with the city.
Just
my
to be
opinion.
a successful formula.
I agree with that 100%. I think if we're not going to wait until in my opinion, the only other option would be to wait until 2017, because if we tried to do it later in 16, I agree, people are going to be like, wait, didn't we just pass this, you know? And I think that if we work together with the school district, I think it could totally be a message of, you know, this is what we need all around, vote yes on both.
And you may have noticed that 2017 was suspiciously missing from your calendar list. I swear that was not as covert as it may have looked. It's just you lose so much energy just churning and churning and churning through a whole year and a half to get to a bond issue that we would strongly recommend that you consider the 2016.
It's not that I disagree. I have some concerns and reservations. And I realize we have new leadership at the school district and quite a different board than what we did last time that they tried to pass the bond levy that they did. My concern is that if they come back and do what they did last time with such a substantial, huge increase proposed, that it failed miserably last time. It went down 70 to 30%. And I would like to think that the two issues, the two bonds are complementary of each other and a sign of needing progress, and progress is happening, yes. But if we would have had a no tax increase during the last bond levy, I think it would have miserably failed. Just, you know, because and not to, you know, when an issue fails 70 to 30%, you know, it's just, there's something really going on with people, and the reason why that they came out so overwhelmingly and said not just no, but slam the door on no, you know, and that's my concern, you know, and I would like to see what the school district is looking at before I say yes, let's get on there, because, you know, I want to be able to assure that, you know, that if we go for this, that we have the best chance going for it.
And a couple of things I would point out. That when the school district did that, it wasn't a bond issue. It was for their operating levy, and it was totally a tax increase. What they're actually proposing for this within the facility study is actually a no tax increase bond issue, just like ours, for capital improvements. So you can get into that sticky area, especially when you're dealing with an operating levy and the amount of the increase that they were originally looking for. But it's kind of two different beasts in this particular case that they're looking at.
Kevin, I agree with pretty much all your points. I mean, I agree. I think a previous issue probably would have had some difficulty. And I equate a lot of that to the recession of 07, 08, the wave in 08 and 09, and the anti-government rhetoric that went with that. I think we're coming out of that, albeit slowly and maybe more jobless than we required. But I think, again, as Jim said, your taxes aren't going to change. If we can work with the school together on these as companion bills, your taxes aren't going to increase. Here's what you're going to get out of this. It's going to be affordable. There's going to be a change in your levy. You know, they're going to look for new school facilities and explain and we have to do a good job of, even though we can't do an advocacy program, we have to do a good job of educating. It's like, it's time for us to step up and offer you a little bit more back. Here's what we want to do. Here's the projects. It's one of the things I'm kind of excited about, win, lose, or draw, actually, and I've told Jim about this. I'm ready to go out and do the town hall meetings today. I'm ready to go out and start meeting with people saying, hey, is this something you want? Tell us. If not, you know, then we'll make some changes, but we want to get back. We want to start doing some stuff. You know, we've run a really good checkbook here, a really good checkbook. We want to keep taking care of your money, but we want to, you know, just like you want to keep up your house, your car, and things like that, you got to put a little back into it. That's what we're going to do, and we're going to do it responsibly. Your taxes aren't going to go up, and here's some things we hope to have for you in the next couple of years. So just my thoughts. I don't disagree with anything that you said, but I think probably we're at a point where maybe ideal, maybe not. Maybe getting ahead of them was probably the ideal game. We're just not going to get the chance to do that. So we go into it in kind of a partnership. I don't know how much working together we can do with them, but with your background and your contacts with them and Sonia, I think surely we can get something done. My thoughts.
Man, I appreciate that, and that's the kind of dialogue that I think is constructive. You know, explaining to the people that this is not a increase, this is a no increase, this is not a levy, this is, you know, we are going after capital improvements and laying out, you know, and saying what our needs are, and, you know, working with the other entity if we need to. Yes, you know, and I think that's very, very constructive, and I think that would be, I mean, I'm not trying to ring Jim's bell any more than what I'm going to, but he's very well qualified to do this, and I have total confidence in Meredith, you know, and if we do decide to bring on a communications PR person, I think that would be good too. But, you know, these are discussions that not only us, but the people that are listening to us talk about this know firmly that this is what our intent is, you know, and, you know, that way I want transparency, you know, and I know we will have that from our end. I know we will. So I welcome it. I welcome it, and I see nothing but good to come out of those discussions. So please, I mean, all of my colleagues, Jeff, Jay, Tonya, you know, speak up, you know, and give me that dialogue, because it's helpful for me.
Just to add to that a little bit, I feel like the school district has been working hard on the front end of their side of it. They've had a lot of communication committee meetings with community members and such. They, you know, devising some different options, and then they went out again and invited community and families in to say, here are some of the options we came up with. Tell us what you think. Where should we go with this? And from what I hear, it seems like they are planning to go with, you know, they're really taking in that feedback and evaluating their options. And so I feel like when they come back with their no tax increase bond issue as well, they're going to be able to say maybe better than they did with the other one. This is why we need this. This is what we're going to do, you know, with this money. And so I really feel like we're kind of both on the same page maybe, and that I really feel like it could be a great opportunity for us to work together and make it a whole package that in the end doesn't cost anybody any more than they're already giving.
Well, one of my biggest concerns is that if we go before the voters and this fails because of no fault of our own, that, you know, we're associated with another thing, and we fail because of that, is what's the consequences of that? You know, that was specifically the reason why I asked the question 2 weeks ago, is what will this do to our credit rating? You know, what are some of the unintended consequences if we don't do this? You know, we won't have the money to spend on capital improvement programs, at least not until we get one passed, you know, and that is probably one of my biggest concerns, and that's why I am just talking about that right now.
Would that be, just thinking about that, would that be another benefit to us doing it earlier rather than later? If we did it in April 16 and it didn't pass, could we try again in 17?
Absolutely. We go back, we regret, and I've been there too. You go back, you regroup, you listen to what the people are telling you with that particular vote, and then you come back with the modified, better message.
Is there a required amount of time that we have to allow between those requests?
Only that the vote, I want to be sure on this, because I was actually thinking about this relative to one failed issue, that there's a very tight time frame between the actual vote and the deadline for filing, where you almost have to go with the very next one, which you may not want to do anyway. you actually have to be voting as if you're going to fail.
Oh.
And that leads to failure,
Yeah.
real quick. And the one after that is the general election in 2016, which is always interesting to have a ballot issue on, yeah. The general election, yeah. Anything else?
One more thing, just kind of switching gears relative to projects, and this is just sharing some things I've heard in the community. Of course, with the big announcement in Grandview, people who have been paying attention are wondering about the whole idea with the soccer complex here. And so a suggestion that I've heard from some people is maybe looking back at when we were talking about the Civic Center and things to include, things to leave out, maybe looking back at some sort of performing arts center. That the one at the high school is quite small, and that really is a need in the community, something, you know, to partner with the school district. As far as we had heard in that conversation, the plans for the school district didn't include anything like that as far as their improvements they're planning to make, and just wondering if with our arts committee, arts commission, and all of that stuff, if that was something we might consider, just throwing it out there. Right. Or something that could maybe be in and out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, you know, dovetail with that, but this 300-person community room, it could be bigger, and it could include the Performing Arts Center within it. So it's something we're already building for other purposes, so it could be a multi-purpose building.
I just have a comment. I think the work that Mike and his group are doing on the farmers market are going to be key to us pushing this through. To me, that's the one shining example we're going to hold up. That building's built, we've made the improvements, and we've got plans to go forward, even without this bond issue, and the things we're going to do there. This is the kind of stuff we're capable of. You're going to see more of this kind of thing if, you know, if this bond issue passes. That's our intent, at least. I have to be careful. I'm going to have to back up. You have to remind me it's a non-advocacy program.
I've actually been reminded by outside agencies that it's a non-advocacy program.
But I mean, there's so many things we can point to there. It's success. People love it. What we've been able to do in-house without having to go outside and hire somebody. I mean, that's really going to be a key selling point, I think. That's going to be the one we hold up on the pedestal and say, you know, more good things like this are coming. So, great job, Mike. Keep it up.
Speaking of which, could we show up at HOA meetings and maybe showcase some of this to see what people think?
Absolutely. The more we're out there talking to the folks, getting feedback on what they'd like to see, the more chance of success when you come to your final. Yeah, absolutely. And it was actually at an HOA meeting where I was warned, because instead of saying what would be done with it, I kept saying, if you vote yes, here is what will be done. Can't add that first sentence in. It's just kind of odd. But yeah, as we get closer, I would hope, and even now, the more you know about the HOA meetings and you're out there saying, here's the initial list, give me some feedback back on this. I know that Councilmember Moorhead was saying something about the possibility of, in his ward, he and Councilmember Burke are talking about having a town hall meeting where this figures prominently into, you know, here's kind of the direction that we're going. We would be more than happy to facilitate all of those if any of you wanted to have those at any point in time. They're invaluable.
We all should.
And I really feel uncomfortable calling on anybody, so just jump into the conversation instead of... Great, all good feedback. We'll start working on the costs associated with Johnson Parkway. The second item for tonight is a presentation that yes, sir?
did have one, and I don't know if it may not be part of this. I'm not sure what the cost is on it. It may just be something that the Parks Board may consider. And I know we talked about it in general before, but had really not explored it, was the addition of the, I don't know what the proper term is for them. I call them the tarp shades.
Oh,
The big poles?
they're working on it.
Okay, that was another one that I had been approached about.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I can tell you that they've explored 3 different applications of that. Right.
Usually it's like 3 poles of it, but they're not real heavy. Yeah.
And they're looking at 3 different applications. I even know that, as far as that particular project is concerned. And this could practically be on every meeting anymore these days too, is the never-ending curb issue. And Mike came to me, and you all saw it in the packet, with a suggestion, and we may need to hold this one off too, so that we get at least a quorum here for nods. But it doesn't hurt to make the presentation. It gives us great practice. The idea, well, I'll just kind of let Mike explain, but the guys who are boots on the ground came to Mike with some suggestions as they're out there doing the curb repairs and inspecting curb repairs when it's a third party. And so I'll just kind of let Mike go from there.
Thanks. Well, as you know, the current funding for the curb replacement program allows us to replace about 20,000 feet of curb a year, and then we had tried to supplement that with a kind of a stopgap patching with our operations staff. And just to kind of run through, the curb program is meant to address, for the most part, what we consider a type 3 deterioration, which this is kind of representative. We will then address what we call a type 2, and then occasionally we'll replace some curb that's deteriorated in this condition. And what we're finding in the field is there are areas that aren't currently programmed for several years that the curb has deteriorated. It doesn't show up really well here, but it's deteriorated. Yeah, could you go back to the presentation, please? It was on laser pointer. Just present it from the beginning, Jim, and I'll run back through. Upper right where it says present. Straight up. Straight up. Straight up. Nope. Down where it says present. Left one box. Present from beginning. No, just from the beginning. Or F5, yeah, for the shortcut. So, without the laser pointer, what we are encountering in the field is areas where the curb is just turned to gravel, and in some areas it may be several years before we're able to get there and patch it. Although this one is programmed in next year's program, so what you see here is we would recommend that with the crew's work order that we would patch it. The same way here, there's some minor deterioration, but what we are encountering is areas like this, where it could be next year that it's programmed, it could be several years out before we're going to be able to get there to replace it, and this really needs to be replaced. And what the crews are getting from feedback from the residents when they're talking to them, they don't really care so much about the curb in front of their house. It's the curb in front of their driveway that they really want repaired. So we also have some encounters like this, and this is a street in Ward Park Place that has the what we call the high back curb, and we're going to be anecdotally we're finding that this curb actually may be a little more durable than the historic
Anecdotally is Mike and I have been driving the city, and you just plain old don't see the curb itself with high back curb deteriorated. It, in this case, or wherever it was, you actually see where the rollover was at the driveway at one time before they flattened the driveway. Curb on either side is fine. Now what we do see, like up here on Johnson Parkway, right next to the bank, is the flat part, like right here. In fact, that's a picture of it. The flat will give way, but that's easily repairable. And look, but the curb where the flat was giving way is perfect. So we're probably going to be coming back to the council with the possibility of, instead of continuing to do rollback curb, going with the flat back curb. That's going to look a little odd in some spots. I mean, you're going to have rollback, and until that rollback deteriorates, you're going to have flat back right next to it. Driven several areas. Kansas City has gone to the program with flat back. And you see several areas, even in some of the nicer areas down in Brookside, around Luce Park, where you'll be driving along and there'll be rollback right next to some brand new flat back. And you really don't notice it unless you're absolutely looking for it. And you can go with a lower flat back that makes it less distinct. Sorry, Mike.
That's all right. One of the things, in addition to that, we are also looking at perhaps changing the subdivision standards. There's going to be, one of the downsides of it is, as you see here, the builder, you can kind of guess where the driveways are going to go, but the builder here, they wound up removing the curb and then pouring the driveway. And unfortunately, in this case, they poured the driveway all the way out to the street instead of leaving a separation with the curb that, we have a definite line. So what we would propose here with this is, where you see the line is a saw cut, because you've got the curb line and the driveway approach, and the driveway approach is really the homeowner's responsibility, and we may get some blowback on that. But we really should only be responsible for the curb.
I apologize, but I really need some education here on some things. I need to verify a few things. When you say flat back versus roll back, let's make sure I understand correctly. And this drawing's not very good, but flat back's almost like the 90 degrees. Is that
It's
right?
like it's referred to as a barrier curb, because it's directly raised, and then this is kind of called surmountable. It's your typical driveway.
The rollback is the kind of, it is
Yeah.
the roller coaster like mine.
Right.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. And then I've heard some things, and I've never verified them with you. I know a little bit about the curb replacement program, but I'll confess my ignorance. I've heard, I assumed that our curb deteriorates because it's reached its useful life, but I also heard that we had inferior curb put in some years ago, and that's what we're trying to counter. Can you tell me
Sure.
which one's correct?
What started this is in Overland Park about 10 years ago. They noticed that curb was deteriorating like this and nowhere near the end of its useful life. So it started in the metro area on the Kansas side, and they did a lot of research, and what they found is that the limestone aggregate in this area is not very durable with the freeze-thaw cycles. And so it is very susceptible to the action of freeze-thaw. Even though you air and train the concrete, which is supposed to provide a little bit of a cushion during the freeze-thaw and not let water, permeate in so much, it's really the durability of the concrete or the aggregate. So a number of years ago on the Kansas side, they started importing granite aggregate. The cities would get together, figure out what concrete work they had to do, and they would truck the aggregate in. That then evolved to the Kansas City area Materials Board, which is a group of cities that have gotten together and come up with a concrete spec which has a granite or a more durable aggregate than the limestone that we have. So what we're seeing here is deterioration due to freeze-thaw cycles, and it's all over. It's as far west as Lawrence, and all around the metro area, cities are having this and dealing with this same condition.
And we've been using the more durable model for a few years?
In 2007, we started doing it on our capital improvement project, so any publicly funded project, and then just 2 or 3 years ago, we incorporated it into the subdivision code. So now, all flat work, exterior flat work associated with single-family home construction, sidewalks, and curb and gutter that's installed by the developers has to meet that
So
standard.
a lot of what we're doing is catch-up. It's, I mean, theoretically, at some point, we'll be at a point where we'll see less deterioration because we've used more durable materials since '07 at one stage, and then with the
But
new
one of the
subdivision.
one of the challenges we're having is, you know, it's all kind of like with our streets. It's all relative from an infrastructure age standpoint. It's all about the same age, and it's all deteriorating or susceptible to deterioration. So that is one of the challenges that we're having.
I apologize for, but I really needed that education. Thank you very much. Thanks for bearing with me. I just need to clear that up. Thank you.
Sure. So again, what's coming back from the field is, you know, folks aren't so concerned about what's in the lower part of the drawing as much as they are in there with the driveways. And budget wise, we, you know, between our mud jacking for sidewalk program, patching, and other sidewalk repairs that we do, operations just doesn't have enough funding available to take on a lot of these driveway replacements. And so what we're proposing is similar to what we did with the street preservation program. We have always typically bid a little bit less footage than what we estimate was budgeted, and then just because the bidding environment, we just wanted to have that cushion, and then we would, within the project areas, we would expand up to the budgeted amount. This year's project, we've held back, well, based on the bid prices, we have about $59,000 left in the budget. And so, speaking with my field inspector, he thinks, you know, based on what he has looked at in the project area, without expanding, but there's always a little bit more on a street that we've identified. He thinks he can cover everything on the streets that we've identified to do work on for about no more than half of what the budget surplus is. And so what we're proposing is to take the other 50% and do spot driveway repairs that are identified by the field crews when they're out there responding to a work order. I think what we'll kind of evaluate is if things are on the 2016 program and we think they can limp until next year, we might do some patching. If it's 3 years out, we will definitely coordinate. We would definitely coordinate and do the replacement of the driveways, and whether or not we could do some patching or some other things on that same street, we'll see how budget allows. This is real similar to what we did last year with the modification to the street preservation program that'll be starting next year, where we've kind of set aside about $100,000 a year to address those 1 or 2 orphan streets that always show up that need a little bit more robust work. So, so I want to, kind of credit my crew for bringing this forward and saying, we really need to do something. Here's what we're hearing, and so we'd like to try it this year, see what kind of feedback we get, and if then moving forward, we would then probably program accordingly for our budgeting purposes.
I think we've gone over this before, but maybe you haven't heard about this yet. Is there a maximum amount of curbing that you can lay in a year? And if so, what is it, and what determines that?
I think it's the construction season. I mean, with our it depends. Multiple contracts, we could probably lay quite a bit of curb. I would somewhere, maybe $1 million to $2 million worth of work, just because of the way our budget cycle is. The fiscal year starts in November. we pull things together and get it out to bid by, April or May. Work starts in June. That gives us about 4 or 5, a 4 or 5 month construction season. Now, some of that, can carry over into the, we could bid and knowing that we're going to have some downtime during the winter, and then it picks up the next spring, so there would be a little bit of overlap.
So, I think what I was going to say. We could actually lay more than we do now. So if it would become an eventuality that some of this would end up in the bond program, that you could actually use the money?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, it wouldn't be 5 million in 1 year. I mean, we would program what we could. The other challenge we have is we get questioned, and our program is set up based on just isolated areas. Some cities have gone, they know it's susceptible and we replace everything, and we just can't. Our budget currently does not allow for that, so we're just doing triage.
So if we switch the type of curb we're using, how long is that gonna take to get it all uniform again?
Some areas, it could be fairly quickly if the curb deteriorates. Others, it could be, it'd be fortunate that we don't have to go back and
But
do that.
as far as having a street that has, this kind, and then that,
I think one of the things, we're still working through. One of the things we looked at is, at a minimum, if we're going to do that, we would do from driveway to driveway. So you don't have between driveways, a 20-foot stretch of the barrier curb and then immediately transition. A good spot that we can transition is at the driveways.
I'm going to try to refrain from giving my support, but I can see myself easily supporting what your crews come up with, and I congratulate them and say kudos and thank them, for their forward thinking, their innovative, and their new ideas. So I totally agree with them. I think that's a very prudent way to go, and that gives a lot of, I don't want to say bang for the buck, but it gives a lot of satisfaction to complaints that we commonly hear. So I see that as it's a hand-in-hand deal there. I don't want to say no-brainer, but I think that's what it is. Another question that I would ask, and thank you for your question there, because you just kind of answered one there for me. But in the first slide, can you go back to the first slide, because I'm going to point something out. And is that the first one? Okay, go to the second. I'm going to try to keep coming. Right there. Okay, in front of that driveway, we'll say that approach there is deteriorated to the point that I think that's a number 3.
Yes.
Okay, now the cracks out in the street, and you notice how the water is seeping out and kind of wicking out of the street there? Is that a cause and effect from that deteriorating curb? Because I have seen that throughout the city, particularly in several of the streets in my neighborhood. And, where I really became aware of it was directly in front of my house before the curb was replaced in my house. And I'm wondering if that is that possible that is causing consequential damage to the street itself because of the water being a place for it to get to there?
Yes, and that's how we arrived at the difference between this, where the curb is cracked, being what we consider a condition 2, versus this, because just as you said, in front of that driveway, where the gap is and where it's rubbleized, the water is getting down and getting under the street and undermining the street. So that's one of the criteria that differentiates, if these were just isolated strips rather than the entire street, that's one of the criteria that differentiates it from this.
Okay, then can I ask this? I need to hear it, because I already know the answer. By us doing this, switching to this, we could be improving the quality, the street life, the longevity of the street life, just by fixing the curbs itself, so it doesn't continue to do that,
Certainly, yes.
which may very well diminish the cost of our street replacement and upkeep on that too.
Yes.
So, again, there's my justification right there, but please bring this back when we have a full consensus
Well,
here.
I think my intent would be, because the curb program is up for second reading, and we normally don't do a staff report at second reading, but I would like to do just do the highlights of this, and that would then be, council could give us formal direction on that at second reading for the contract award.
I know you don't have enough for consensus, but I agree with everything Kevin said. I mean, how much greater satisfaction can you have when people are having a problem right in front of their house? I mean, as opposed to the way we've done it now, just from a citizen standpoint, well, they're going to get to our neighborhood next year. Don't know when, but this is a deal where we identify a problem that a citizen is having in particular in front of their house. And we now have the organizational setup to where that can be, the staff sees it, we get direct feedback from the end user, and we can fix it there. We're still taking care of the problem, but we're taking care of our citizens on a one-by-one basis. I'm in full support of it as well, just FYI.
Terrific. We'll be putting that on the agenda then for the second read. That's all we've got tonight, unless the council present would have anything else they want to throw out.
I've probably seen the schedule at one time or another, but since we've been talking about curb replacement so much, I noticed, and it's kind of weird, maybe there's an explanation for it, but 58 on the south side from at least Price Chopper down to the church there by Foxwood Springs is pretty rough. Now, the north side looks pretty intact along that same stretch, and I was just curious, A, if there's a reason, and B, where that's at on the repair. To me, 58 needs a little bit, to me, that's got to have a little bit more priority because it's the main arterial through town. Everybody touches it. We've got to keep that one open, and we got to keep it running. I don't know where it stands or what. We've got like, 3 tiers or something like that of damage. I don't know where it stands, but I just happened to notice it the other night. I was pointing it out to my wife as we went. I was like, oh, wow, the south side's really, it looks like it's been hit by mortars. North side looks great.
Well, we did a lot of patching on the north side last year, and we use a different material. What you see here on Johnson is a water mix mortar type material. What we use on 58 and some of the other areas is actually and it works really well in these type of repairs. It's actually a hot mix epoxy based concrete. And so we rent the trailer and we rent the material, or we buy the material, and we use it on 58. It's very durable. Where a patch like this may last only 2 or 3 years, we've got some patches up in I'd say the meadows that have been in place for 4 or 5 years using this material. So that's what we use it on, is on the major arterials, and so we'll be programming that for later this summer. Yep.
Dovetailing off that question, Jay, I'll ask you for clarification. As I heard you asking that question, I thought you were talking about sidewalk. Was you specifically talking more of curbing?
No, it's just what I looked at for along 58 from about Price Chopper to the church. May have been sidewalk too. I just
Okay. But it spurred my memory, and I'm going to ask the question if please indulge me. Here a while back, we were given an update, or I'll say an update. Thank you. I believe it came from Mr. Cross that the staff was looking at herbicides to spray into the cracks of, or the joints of our sidewalks, so it didn't deteriorate that. I'm kind of curious, have we been doing that, or where are we at with that? And then I'll lead to the next question.
We actually started a pilot program this year around the circle here and out on 58, which is a recommended pre-emergent program. The challenge we had with some of the other programs that we were investigating is once the weeds come up, you kill them where you know they are, and then you have dead weeds growing out of the sidewalk and the curb line for the rest of the season until they go away, and some of those things just don't want to go away, period. So we're doing the circle here, and we're doing 58, and we're doing Broadmoor and the side streets here just as a pilot program to see if it works. It appears to be fairly successful. When I've been driving 58 this year, as much as things have been growing, I am not seeing it. Now, if you look really close, you'll see where we miss sometimes, and there's a little yellow streak next to where we were actually putting the pre-emergent down. But I think it's working, Mike.
Yep, and we've scheduled 3 applications, and so, you know, subject if it ever quits raining, I think the next application is scheduled for early June.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, I measured 1.75 inches just the other night through the 5 rains that we had. So, you know, we are having some good rain as far as I'm concerned. I love it. But I guess why I'm bringing this up is because I remember a couple of years ago, and not to disparage Mrs. Hubach, because God bless her, I've seen her. I've seen her add some real good effect, and I hear her tonight saying that the sidewalks along 58 between Lowe's and City Hall are looking pretty shaggy because of the edges and that. So I will jump on that bandwagon and take that heat for tonight. If that program is successful in between the cracks, my question would be, would it be good to think about even going beside the sidewalks? You know, I'm all about preserving our investment that we have in our infrastructure, and if we can protect it by not having weeds grow by it, I think it would be dollars well spent to go that route instead of rather mud jacking or jackhammering out replacement.
Well, what we did do is, in the areas where, especially around the curve where the sidewalk butts right up to the curb, we sprayed both the joint between the curb and the pavement and the joint between the curb and the sidewalk. And so we're just kind of checking and see how it performs.
Just a comment, it's kind of weird, and we get a small group, but I thought this is one of the most informative sessions we've had. I learned a lot tonight, and nothing against not having anybody here, but no, I thought it was really good, and please send kudos to your staff for us to get that kind of direct feedback. We spend thousands of dollars on surveys and we don't get that kind of, that's great stuff. I mean, it really is, because that's something that we can make administrative change in, that you can implement, and like I said, that's straight give back to the people who live here. That's good stuff. We can't buy that. We really can't. That's good. So please tell them kudos, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.